The hot desert winds whipped across the barren landscape as Princess Elena's sleek diplomatic shuttle made an ungraceful landing, kicking up clouds of reddish dust. Elena gripped the armrests of her pilot's seat, her knuckles turning white as she fought to maintain control of the damaged craft. Just moments ago, her routine diplomatic mission to the newly established human colony had taken a perilous turn. Her shuttle had been ambushed by a notorious band of space pirates, their motives undoubtedly a mix of greed and political agenda. The pirates had fired upon her ship, crippling its engines and navigation systems. Elena had been left with no choice but to make an emergency landing on the colony's remote outer reaches. As the shuttle lurched to a stop, Elena took a steadying breath and surveyed the damage. The hull was scorched and dented, the main thrusters completely disabled. Glancing at the sensor readings, her stomach sank. The pirate's vessel was still in pursuit, rapidly closing in on her location. "This is bad," she murmured to herself, her fingers flying across the control panel as she tried to reboot the systems. "I must send a distress signal, or I'll be captured for sure." Just then, a thunderous explosion rocked the shuttle, followed by the sound of twisting metal. Elena felt her heart leap into her throat. The pirates had caught up to her. Steeling her nerves, she braced herself for the inevitable confrontation. The ramp hissed open, and Elena stepped out into the glaring sunlight, her flowing silver robes billowing around her. She raised her chin defiantly as three hulking, armor-clad figures emerged from the pirates' battered craft. "Well, well, if it isn't the esteemed Princess Elena," the lead pirate sneered, his grizzled face twisting into a cruel grin. "Your people will pay a pretty price for your safe return, I imagine." Elena's lips tightened into a thin line. "I will not be your bargaining chip, scum. Release me at once, or you will suffer the full wrath of the Eridani Empire." The pirate let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, I'm shaking in my boots. Your precious empire is half a galaxy away. No one is coming to save you, Princess." He raised his blaster, the weapon's barrel aimed directly at Elena's heart. Just as his finger tightened on the trigger, a blur of movement caught the pirate's eye. A lone figure emerged from behind a nearby rocky outcrop, moving with startling speed and grace. Before the pirate could react, the figure leaped into the air, delivering a devastating kick that sent the blaster flying from the pirate's hand. Elena watched in stunned silence as the mysterious warrior, a human male, she realized, engaged the three pirates in a flurry of punches and kicks. He moved with a fluid, almost dance-like precision, effortlessly dodging their clumsy attempts to retaliate. In less than a minute, the pirates lay sprawled at the human's feet, groaning in pain. Elena stared at him, her violet eyes wide with a mixture of awe and bewilderment. She had never witnessed such raw, unbridled power from a human before. Most of the colony's residents she had encountered were mild-mannered farmers and merchants, hardly the warriors she was accustomed to in her own society. The human straightened, brushing a strand of dark hair from his face as he regarded Elena. Up close, she could see that he was young, perhaps no more than a few decades old by human standards. His features were rugged, yet there was an undeniable handsomeness to them. "Are you all right, Your Highness?" he asked, his deep voice tinged with concern. Elena blinked, momentarily forgetting her training in regal composure. Yes. I'm unharmed, thanks to your timely intervention." She cleared her throat, scooting her features into a more neutral expression. "I am Princess Elena of the Eridani Empire." "And you are?" "Jax," he replied simply. "Just Jax." He cast a wary glance at the unconscious pirates. "We should get you to safety. Those scum will be waking up soon, and they'll be out for blood." Elena hesitated, unused to taking orders from a mere human. But as she studied Jax's earnest expression, she realized that he was right. Her ship was crippled, and she had no way to contact her people for rescue. She had no choice but to trust this stranger. "Very well, Jax." She inclined her head slightly. "Lead the way." Jax nodded, then gestured for Elena to follow as he set off across the barren landscape, his steps quick and purposeful. Elena gathered the folds of her robe and hurried after him, silently hoping that she was not making a grave mistake in putting her life in the hands of a human. Elena struggled to keep pace with Jax as he led her across the rugged terrain, her delicate slippers sinking into the loose, shifting sand. The alien landscape was harsh and foreign, a far cry from the lush, verdant worlds she was accustomed to in the Eridani Empire. "How much farther is this place you're taking me?" she asked, her normally melodic voice laced with a hint of impatience. Jax glanced back at her, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Not too much farther. There's an abandoned settlement a few clicks from here. It'll provide better shelter and cover than standing out in the open like this." Elena nodded, though she still felt unsettled. She was unused to relying on the kindness of strangers, let alone a human who was practically a child in her eyes. Yet, she reminded herself, this young warrior had just saved her life. She owed him a debt of gratitude, even if the thought of being beholden to a member of the lesser species grated against her every instinct. As they reached the dilapidated structures of the abandoned settlement, Elena couldn't help but wrinkle her nose in distaste. The buildings were constructed of crude, dusty materials, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. "This is where you intend to hide me?" she asked, her tone dripping with disdain. Jax shot her a mildly exasperated look. "It's not exactly the Eridani royal palace, I know, but it'll have to do, at least until we can figure out a way to get your ship flying again." Elena sighed, resigning herself to the less than ideal accommodations. "Very well, lead on." As Jax guided her through the settlement, Elena couldn't help but steal furtive glances at him. She was still amazed by the display of strength and skill she had witnessed back at the crash site. Most humans she had encountered were soft, timid creatures, easily cowed by the mere presence of an Eridani noble. Yet this Jax had fearlessly taken on 3 armed pirates, dispatching them with a grace and efficiency that rivaled even the finest Eridani warriors. "Tell me, Jax," Elena said, her curiosity finally getting the better of her, "where did you learn to fight like that? I have never seen a human display such prowess in battle." Jax shot her a wry grin. "Let's just say I've had some unique training experiences. Growing up on the edge of the colony, you pick up a few survival skills." Elena arched a delicate brow. "Survival skills, you say? And what, pray tell, have you been surviving against out here?" "Oh, you know, bandits, wild animals, the occasional rogai." Jax shrugged nonchalantly. "The usual hazards of colonial life." Elena's eyes widened slightly at the mention of rogai. She had heard tales of such threats, but they were mostly confined to the outer fringes of Eridani space. The idea that humans had to contend with such dangers on a daily basis was unsettling. "I see," she murmured, her gaze thoughtful. "You humans are far more resilient than I had imagined." Jax chuckled. "You're just full of surprises, aren't you, Your Highness?" Elena felt a faint flush creep across her cheeks at his casual tone. "I beg your pardon. I mean, here I am, a simple colonial soldier, and I've got an actual alien princess relying on me for protection. Not exactly what I expected when I woke up this morning." Jax grinned, his green eyes twinkling with amusement. Elena pursed her lips, unsure whether to be offended or amused by his irreverent attitude. Yes, well, the situation is hardly ideal for me either. I had planned on a routine diplomatic mission, not— She gestured vaguely at their surroundings. This. Yeah, I figured as much. Jax's expression sobered slightly. Listen, Princess, I know you probably don't trust me all that much, and I can't say I fully understand your fancy Eridani ways. But for what it's worth, I'll do my best to get you and your ship back in one piece. You have my word on that. Elena regarded him thoughtfully, sensing the sincerity in his words. I'd appreciate that, Jax. Truly. She hesitated, then added, and please call me Elena. Jax grinned. Elena it is then. He motioned towards a nearby building. Come on, let's see what we can salvage from this place to get your ship back in the air. As Elena followed him, she couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this human, with his unexpected skills and genuine concern, would be a valuable ally in her quest to return home. And perhaps, just perhaps, she might even come to see him as something more than a mere servant of the lesser species. Over the next several days, Elena and Jax worked tirelessly to repair the damage to her shuttle. Elena was initially appalled by the primitive tools and salvaged parts they had to work with, but she quickly realized that Jax's resourcefulness and ingenuity more than made up for the lack of sophisticated technology. As they toiled side by side, Elena found herself observing Jax with growing fascination. His physical strength and dexterity were impressive, but it was his sharp mind and inventive problem-solving that truly captivated her. He seemed to have an innate understanding of how the shuttle's systems functioned, often anticipating her needs and instructions before she could even voice them. You know, for a colonial soldier, you're remarkably adept at engineering, Elena remarked one day, wiping the sweat from her brow. Jax flashed her a lopsided grin. What can I say? I've always been good with my hands. He paused, then added, besides, I spent a lot of time tinkering with machinery and tech back home. Helped me stay sharp, you know. Elena nodded slowly, her violet eyes thoughtful. Indeed. I confess, I'm rather impressed by your capabilities, Jax. Most humans I've encountered have been rather, shall we say, less than skilled in such matters. Jax let out a soft chuckle. Yeah, well, we colonials have to be a bit scrappier than your average Eridani noble, I suppose. He shot her a teasing look. No offence. Elena felt a flicker of annoyance at his casual jibe, but she couldn't deny the truth in his words. The humans she had interacted with during her diplomatic missions were often overwhelmed by her regal presence and elaborate social protocols. In contrast, Jax seemed utterly unfazed by her status, treating her with a level of informality that she found both refreshing and, at times, disconcerting. None taken, she replied evenly. Though I must say, your direct manner of speaking is quite different from what I'm accustomed to. Jax chuckled. Yeah, I've noticed that about you Eridani types. All that fancy etiquette and protocol, it's enough to make a guy's head spin. He paused, his expression growing more contemplative. But I got to admit, it's kind of fascinating in its own way. Elena arched a brow. Fascinating, you say? Well, yeah, Jax shrugged. I mean, the way you carry yourself, the way you choose your words, it's like a whole other language, you know. And I don't know, I guess I'm curious to learn more about it. Elena felt a curious flutter in her chest at his words. Most humans she had encountered seemed to view Eridani customs with a mixture of bemusement and disdain, dismissing them as needlessly elaborate and outdated. But Jax's genuine interest caught her off guard. "I see." Elena paused, considering her next words carefully. "Well, in that case, perhaps you would permit me to enlighten you, as it were. I confess, I'm rather intrigued by your own cultural traditions as well." Jax's face lit up in a grin. "Really? Yes, of course. I'd be honored, Your Highness." Elena couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. "Excellent. Then let us begin with the proper way to address an Eridani royal." And so, over the course of the next few hours, Elena found herself engaged in a lively discussion with Jax, patiently explaining the nuances of Eridani etiquette and social hierarchy. To her surprise, Jax listened with rapt attention, his green eyes alight with curiosity as he peppered her with questions. In turn, Elena found herself equally fascinated by Jax's descriptions of life on the human colony, the challenges they faced, the traditions they upheld, the way they navigated the harsh realities of their existence. She had always viewed humans as little more than primitive, uncivilized beings, but Jax's tales painted a far more complex and resilient picture. As the hours slipped by, Elena felt the tentative walls of distrust and prejudice slowly crumbling. In their place, a newfound sense of mutual understanding and respect began to take root. For the first time in her life, she found herself genuinely curious about the ways of another species. "You know, Jax," she said softly, "perhaps we are not so different after all." Jax met her gaze, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Maybe not, Your Highness. Maybe not." In that moment, Elena felt a stirring within her, a glimmer of possibility that she had never before considered. As they continued their work on the shuttle, her mind raced with the implications of this unexpected kinship. For perhaps, just perhaps, the humans were not the inferior beings she had always believed them to be. As the days turned into weeks, Elena found herself growing increasingly drawn to Jax. His unwavering determination, quick wit, and genuine curiosity about her culture had chipped away at the carefully constructed walls she had built around her heart. Elena had always prided herself on her ironclad composure, her ability to keep her emotions in check no matter the circumstance. Yet whenever she was in Jax's presence, she felt a curious fluttering in her chest, a warmth that threatened to melt the ice that encased her noble demeanor. It was unsettling, this loss of control, and Elena found herself struggling to reconcile her growing feelings with her duty as a princess of the Eridani Empire. She knew that any sort of romantic entanglement with a human, no matter how charming or capable he might be, would be utterly scandalous, a violation of the strict social codes that governed her people. And yet, when Jax would flash her that lopsided grin or casually brush his calloused hand against hers as they worked side by side, Elena found it increasingly difficult to maintain her aloof distance. There was an undeniable magnetism to him, a raw, untamed energy that seemed to call out to something deep within her. One day, as they were painstakingly reassembling the shuttle's navigation systems, Elena paused to wipe the sweat from her brow. Jax's gaze followed the graceful arc of her movement, and Elena felt a spark of electricity pass between them. "You know, Princess," Jax said softly, his voice tinged with a hint of mischief, "I have to say you clean up pretty well for someone who's been slumming it in an abandoned colony outpost." Elena felt a flush creep across her cheeks at his teasing tone. "I beg your pardon?" "I'll have you know that I am always impeccably groomed, regardless of my circumstances." Jax chuckled. "Oh, I have no doubt about that. But there's just something about the way you carry yourself, even when you're covered in grease and sand." He leaned in slightly, his green eyes sparkling. "It's captivating." Elena's breath caught in her throat as she met his gaze, suddenly hyper-aware of the heat radiating from his body, the faint scent of sweat and engine oil that clung to him. She felt a familiar fluttering in her chest, a desperate urge to reach out and touch him. Jax, She swallowed hard, cursing her momentary loss of composure. I'm not certain this is appropriate. Jax's expression sobered, and he leaned back, giving her some space. You're right, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. He ran a hand through his hair, his brow creased with concern. Look, Elena, I know you're a princess, and I'm just some lowly colonial soldier. I get that. I don't expect anything to come of this, I swear. Elena felt a pang of guilt at the disappointment in his voice. Jax, it's not that I don't. She paused, searching for the right words. It's simply that. Our worlds are so vastly different. The expectations placed upon me, the duties I must uphold. She shook her head slowly. I'm afraid there is no place for personal entanglements in my life. Jax nodded, his jaw set in a resolute line. I understand. Really, I do. He reached out and gently squeezed her hand, sending a shiver through Elena's body. But just know that, no matter what, I'll always be here for you. As a friend, if nothing else. Elena felt her heart swell with a curious mix of gratitude and sorrow. Thank you, Jax. That means more to me than you know. They held each other's gaze for a moment, the charged tension between them palpable. Then, with a deep breath, Jax turned his attention back to the shuttle's systems, effectively putting an end to the delicate conversation. Elena watched him work, her mind whirling. She knew she should be relieved, grateful that Jax seemed to understand the boundaries that separated them. And yet, a part of her couldn't help but mourn the loss of what could have been, a chance at a connection that transcended the limitations of their respective stations. As the days passed, Elena found herself torn between the pull of her duties and the allure of Jax's steadfast companionship. She knew that she should remain focused on the task at hand, on repairing her shuttle and returning to her people. But every time she caught a glimpse of Jax's warm smile or heard the resonance of his voice, her resolve threatened to crumble. It was a dangerous game she was playing, one that could have dire consequences if discovered. And yet, try as she might, Elena found herself unable to resist the growing temptation. Perhaps, just this once, she could allow herself to indulge in the forbidden, to reach out and grasp the possibility of something more. The sound of blaster fire shattered the relative peace of the abandoned settlement, sending Elena and Jax scrambling for cover. They had been making steady progress on the shuttle's repairs, but it seemed their brief respite was now over. Looks like our pirate friends have caught up to us, Jax growled, his expression hardening as he drew his own weapon. Stay behind me, Elena. I'll handle this. Elena opened her mouth to protest, but before she could utter a word, the lead pirate from their previous encounter stormed into view, his scarred face twisted in a malicious grin. Well, if it isn't the princess and her pet human, the pirate sneered. Did you really think you could hide from us forever? Jax stepped forward, his blaster raised. Back off, scum. This is your last warning. The pirate let out a harsh laugh. Or what? You'll try to kick me again. I'm not falling for that trick twice, boy. Elena felt a chill run down her spine as she recognized the threat in the pirate's words. Jax's bravery was admirable, but she knew that he was no match for the battle-hardened criminals. She had to do something, but revealing her true identity would only make the situation worse. Jax, please, you must stand down, she pleaded, stepping out from behind him. I will handle this. Jax shot her a bewildered look. Handle it? Elena, these guys want to drag you back to your people as a hostage. I can't just stand by and let that happen. Elena took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. I'm afraid you have no choice, Jax. These men are after me, not you. If you surrender now, they may let you go unharmed. The pirate's eyes narrowed with suspicion. What are you playing at, Princess? Elena turned to face him, her regal bearing commanding the attention of all present. I am Elena, Crown Princess of the Eridani Empire, and I will not be your bargaining chip. Jax's eyes widened in shock, his blaster wavering slightly. You're the princess. But why didn't you tell me? Elena offered him an apologetic look. I'm afraid I had my reasons, but now the time for secrets has passed. She turned back to the pirate, her voice hardening. If you wish to take me, then do so. But leave the human be. He has no part in this. The pirate let out a cruel laugh. Oh, I don't think so, Princess. Your human pet here has been a thorn in our side for far too long. He's coming with us, whether you like it or not. Before Elena could react, the pirate's two companions emerged from the shadows, their blasters aimed at Jax. Elena's heart sank as she realized her attempt to protect him had backfired. Jax gritted his teeth, his grip tightening on his weapon. Elena, get back. I'm not going to let them. But his defiant words were cut short as one of the pirates fired, the blaster bolt striking him squarely in the chest. Elena watched in horror as Jax crumpled to the ground, his blaster clattering to the dust. No, Elena cried, rushing to his side. She cradled his limp form, her violet eyes brimming with tears. Jax, please, hold on. The pirate leader let out a satisfied chuckle. Well, that's one way to ensure his cooperation. He gestured to his men. Secure the princess and get that human scum aboard the ship. We've got a nice little ransom to collect. As the pirates closed in, Elena felt a surge of rage and despair. She had brought this upon Jax, her foolish attempt at noble sacrifice now costing him dearly. And she knew, deep in her heart, that she would do whatever it took to ensure his safe return, even if it meant betraying her own people. The Eridani Empire would surely disown her for this act of treason, but in that moment, Elena could think of only one thing: saving the life of the human who had become far more than just a reluctant ally. Elena's heart pounded in her ears as she watched the pirates drive the unconscious Jax towards their ship. She knew that she needed to act quickly, but the emotions swirling within her made it difficult to think clearly. Please, you must let him go, she pleaded, her regal demeanor crumbling in the face of her desperation. He is of no use to you. It is how you want. The lead pirate sneered at her. Oh, the princess is begging now, is she? How delightful. He gestured to his men. Toss the human in the brig. We'll deal with him later. Elena watched helplessly as Jax was roughly manhandled onto the pirate vessel. She wanted to run to him, to shield him from their brutality, but the two remaining pirates kept their blasters trained on her, daring her to make a move. As the ship's ramp closed, sealing Jax inside, Elena felt a surge of hopelessness. She had failed him, failed to protect the one person who had seen past her noble facade and treated her as an equal. And now he was at the mercy of these vile criminals, all because of her. The lead pirate turned his attention back to Elena, his eyes glinting with malice. Now then, princess, it's time we discuss the terms of your _cooperation_. Elena straightened her spine, her expression hardening. I will not cooperate with you, scum. The Eridani Empire will never pay the ransom you demand. The pirate let out a bark of laughter. Oh, we'll see about that. I'm sure your precious family will be quite eager to have their beloved heir back in one piece." He gestured to his men. "Take her aboard. We've got a long journey ahead of us." As the pirates grabbed hold of her arms, Elena's mind raced, desperately searching for a way to save Jax. She knew that the moment she was delivered to the Eridani Empire, any chance of securing his release would be lost. In a moment of reckless abandon, Elena made her decision. She swung her leg up, catching one of the pirates in the groin with a well-placed kick. The man doubled over, howling in pain, and Elena wrenched herself free of the other pirate's grip. "You'll pay for that, you filthy." The lead pirate snarled, raising his blaster. But before he could fire, Elena reached into her robes and produced a small, compact device. With a flick of her thumb, she activated it, and a blinding flash of light filled the air. The pirates cried out in surprise and pain, their weapons clattering to the ground as they instinctively shielded their eyes. Elena seized the opportunity, sprinting towards the pirate ship, her heart pounding in her chest. "Jax," she called out, her voice laced with desperation. "Jax, can you hear me?" Moments later, the ramp hissed open, and Jax appeared, his face etched with a mixture of relief and confusion. "Elena, what are you?" "No time to explain," she interrupted, grabbing his hand. "We have to get out of here. _now_." Jax hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded, his expression hardening with determination. Together, they raced down the ramp and towards the relative safety of the abandoned settlement, the enraged shouts of the pirates echoing in their wake. As they reached the shelter of the dilapidated buildings, Elena finally allowed herself to catch her breath, her grip on Jax's hand tightening. "Jax, I'm sorry," she gasped, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "This is all my fault. I should have told you the truth from the beginning." Jax stared at her, his brow furrowed with concern. "Elena, what are you talking about? What truth?" Elena took a deep, steadying breath. "I am the crown princess of the Eridani Empire. Those men, they were after me, not you." She shook her head, her expression filled with regret. "I never should have involved you in this. Now, because of me, you're in grave danger." Jax's eyes widened with realization, and for a moment, Elena braced herself for his rejection, his anger at her deception. But to her surprise, he simply squeezed her hand, his green eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "Elena, I had a feeling there was more to you than just an ordinary diplomat," he said softly. "And I don't care who you are or what you've done. All that matters to me is that you're safe." Elena felt a surge of emotion, her carefully constructed walls crumbling in the face of Jax's unwavering loyalty. "But don't you understand?" she whispered. "The pirates, they'll come after you, hunt you down, all because of me. I've put your life in danger, and I couldn't bear it if something happened to you." Jax reached out and gently cupped her face, his calloused thumb brushing away a stray tear. "Hey, it's gonna be okay. We'll figure this out together. I'm not going anywhere, Elena. You're stuck with me, whether you like it or not." Elena stared at him, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and fear. She knew that the path ahead would be fraught with peril, that their actions had set in motion a chain of events that could have devastating consequences. And yet, in that moment, with Jax's unwavering presence by her side, she felt a glimmer of hope. For perhaps, just perhaps, with his help, she could find a way to save him from the looming threat, and in the process, discover a future that defied the limitations of their respective worlds. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the abandoned settlement as Elena and Jax raced towards the damaged shuttle. The pirates had quickly recovered from the disorienting flash grenade attack and were now in hot pursuit, their furious shouts spurring the pair to move even faster. "We need to get this thing airborne, and fast," Jax yelled, his breath ragged as they reached the shuttle's ramp. "Those pirates aren't going to give up without a fight." Elena nodded, her fingers flying across the control panel as she activated the shuttle's systems. "I'm doing everything I can, but the damage is extensive. I'm not certain we'll be able to achieve enough thrust tow." Her words were cut off by a nearby explosion, the shockwave knocking her off balance. Jax caught her, his strong arms steadying her as she regained her footing. "Looks like they brought some bigger guns," he grimaced, his gaze flickering towards the distant figures of the pirates. "We need to buy ourselves some time." Elena's eyes narrowed with determination. "Then let us provide them with a memorable distraction." Jax glanced at her, a hint of a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I thought you'd never ask." Moments later, the two of them burst from the shuttle's hatch, their combined arsenal of blasters and compact flash grenades unleashing a barrage of firepower and disorienting light. The pirates, caught off guard by the unexpected counterattack, scrambled for cover, their curses and shouts of pain filling the air. Elena fought with a grace and ferocity that belied her regal upbringing, her blasts finding their mark with uncanny precision. Jax, in turn, moved with a fluid, almost dance-like agility, his attacks complementing Elena's in a seamless display of coordinated combat. As the pirates regrouped and returned fire, Elena and Jax were forced to retreat, slowly making their way back towards the shuttle's open hatch. Elena could feel the heat of the blaster bolts sizzling past her, and she knew that their window of opportunity was closing fast. "Jax, we need to go, _now_." She yelled, her voice barely audible over the din of the battle. Jax nodded, his expression grim. "I'm right behind you, Elena. Go." Elena hesitated for a fraction of a second, her heart torn between the need to escape and the desire to ensure Jax's safety. But before she could protest, Jax gave her a gentle shove, his eyes filled with a mixture of determination and affection. "I'll be fine," he said, his voice low and steady. "Just get that shuttle in the air. I'll hold them off as long as I can." Elena felt a lump in her throat, but she knew there was no time to argue. With a note of gratitude, she turned and sprinted up the ramp, her fingers flying across the control panel as she poured every ounce of power into the shuttle's engines. The craft shuddered and groaned as it slowly lifted off the ground, its damaged thrusters straining against the weight of the battered hull. Elena risked a glance out the viewport, her breath catching in her throat as she saw Jax, his blaster blazing, holding off the advancing pirates with a ferocity that bordered on recklessness. "Jax, _please_," she whispered, her hands trembling as she guided the shuttle higher. "Don't do this. _come with me _." But Jax's attention was fixed on the task at hand, his focus unwavering as he unleashed another volley of shots, forcing the pirates to take cover. Elena watched, her heart breaking, as the distance between them grew, the shuttle's engines finally finding the strength to carry her away from the abandoned settlement. As the shuttle soared through the sky, Elena's vision blurred with tears. She had made the choice to leave Jax behind, a decision that went against every instinct in her being. And yet, she knew that if she had stayed, their chances of escape would have been slim, and she could not bear the thought of Jax falling victim to the pirates' wrath. "Forgive me, my friend," she whispered, her fingers tracing the outline of the compact flash grenade that still rested in the folds of her robes. "This is not the end, I swear it." With a resolute determination, Elena began to plot a course, her mind racing as she formulated a plan. She would return, no matter the cost, and she would find a way to save Jax from the fate that had befallen him. The Eridani Empire be damned. Her loyalty now belonged to the brave, steadfast human who had risked everything to protect her. As the shuttle disappeared into the distance, Jax held his ground, his blaster fire slowing the pirates' advance. He knew that Elena had made it to safety, and that knowledge filled him with a sense of bittersweet relief. But even as the pirates closed in, his thoughts were not of his own impending capture, but of the promise he had made to the princess, that he would always be there for her, no matter what. With a grim smile, Jax braced himself for the coming onslaught, determined to buy Elena as much time as he could. For if there was one thing he had learned about the Eridani princess, it was that she was a force to be reckoned with, and he had no doubt that she would return, and when she did, the pirates would regret the day they had dared to cross her. The journey back to the Eridani homeworld was a silent and somber one for Elena. As the shuttle glided smoothly through the vastness of space, her thoughts were consumed by the memory of Jax's brave stand against the pirates, and the heavy price he had paid for her sake. Elena knew that she would face severe consequences for her actions. The Eridani Council would likely view her decision to abandon her diplomatic mission and evade capture as a grievous act of treason. She had betrayed her people, her duty, and the very foundations of her noble upbringing. And yet she felt no regret. All that mattered to her now was finding a way to return to the abandoned colony and rescue Jax from the clutches of the pirates. She had made a promise to him, a vow that transcended the boundaries of their respective stations and the demands of her royal lineage. Jax had become more than just a reluctant ally. He was a steadfast companion, a trusted confidant, and a source of strength in a world that had suddenly become far more complex and uncertain. As the shuttle touched down in the grand Imperial spaceport, Elena took a deep, steadying breath. She knew that the moment she stepped off the ramp, her life would be irrevocably changed. But she was prepared to face the consequences, no matter how dire they might be. Elena was immediately met by a contingent of Imperial guards, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and concern. She held her head high as they escorted her to the royal palace, their probing questions and demands for explanations falling on deaf ears. Her mind was focused solely on the task at hand, securing the resources and support she would need to mount a daring rescue mission. When she was finally ushered into the presence of the Eridani Council, the assembled nobles gasped in collective horror at the sight of her dishevelled appearance and the gravity of her tale. Elena recounted the events that had led to her unexpected return, her voice never wavering even as she revealed her decision to abandon the diplomatic mission and the human who had risked everything to protect her. The council erupted into a cacophony of outraged cries and demands for her immediate abdication. But Elena stood firm, her violet eyes burning with a determination that silenced the room. "I understand that my actions have brought great shame upon our esteemed empire," she said, her tone laced with a quiet authority. "But I will not apologize for choosing to save the life of a brave and honorable soul, regardless of his species." The head of the council, a wizened old nobleman, fixed her with a stern gaze. "Princess Elena, you have committed a grave transgression against our people. Your actions have jeopardized our delicate political relationships and endangered the very fabric of our society." Elena met his gaze unflinchingly. "Then so be it. I will gladly accept any punishment you deem fit. But first, I demand that you provide me with the resources necessary to mount a rescue mission and retrieve the human who sacrificed himself to ensure my safe return." The council erupted into a chorus of outraged protests. But Elena refused to be cowed. She stood her ground, her regal bearing and unwavering determination silencing the room once more. Finally, the head of the council raised a hand, calling for silence. "Princess Elena, your actions have indeed been unorthodox. But the bravery and loyalty you have witnessed in this human are not qualities to be taken lightly." He paused, his expression thoughtful. "Very well. We will provide you with the necessary resources to mount a rescue mission. However, we expect you to return promptly with the human in tow. His fate will then be decided by the council." Elena felt a surge of relief, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, honored ones. I will not fail you." With a renewed sense of purpose, Elena set out to assemble her team, her mind racing with strategies and contingency plans. She knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but she was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. As the shuttle prepared for launch, Elena stood at the viewport, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. She knew that she was taking a tremendous risk, not just for her own future, but for the future of the Eridani-human relations. But in that moment, she cared only for one thing: bringing Jax home, safe and sound. "Hold on, my friend," she whispered, a glimmer of hope shining in her eyes. "I'm coming for you." And with that, the shuttle rocketed into the void of space, its course set for the distant colony world, where Jax's fate now hung in the balance. Elena knew that she was embarking on a dangerous gamble, one that could very well cost her everything. But she was willing to take that risk, for the sake of the human who had shown her that the bonds of friendship and trust could transcend the barriers of their respective worlds. As the shuttle disappeared into the vastness of the cosmos, Elena felt a new sense of purpose take root within her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was determined to overcome them, to prove that the Eridani and the humans could forge a path of mutual understanding and respect. And when she finally laid eyes on Jax once more, she vowed, she would make sure that he knew just how deeply his sacrifice had touched her, and how much he meant to her, not just as a loyal companion, but as a cherished friend.